It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. President Obama met with Senator Bernie Sanders on Thursday to push for unity within the Democratic Party. After the meeting, Senator Sanders said he will work with Clinton and the party to defeat Donald Trump, but he will also be staying in the race for the White House until the last primary election next week. Let's have a look.
Let me begin by thanking President Obama and thanking Vice President Biden for the degree of impartiality they established during the course of this entire process. I spoke briefly to Secretary Clinton on Tuesday night, and I congratulated her on her very strong campaign. I look forward to meeting with her in the near future to see how we can work together to defeat Donald Trump and to create a government which represents all of us and not just the 1%. Thank you very much.
After the meeting Senator Sanders had with President Obama, President Obama formally endorsed Secretary Clinton in a campaign ad and urged Sanders supporters to rally around her as the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. Let's have a look.
I want those of you who've been with me from the beginning of this incredible journey to be the first to know that I'm with her. I am fired up, and I cannot wait to get out there and campaign for Hillary. But just like 8 years ago, there are millions of Americans, not just Democrats, who've cast their ballots for the very first time. And a lot of that is thanks to Senator Bernie Sanders, who has run an incredible campaign. Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders may have been rivals during this primary, but they're both patriots who love this country, and they share a vision for the America that we all believe in.
Joining us now to discuss this is Bill Curry. Bill is a columnist for Salon.com and was counselor to the president in the Clinton White House. Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, as always.
Bill, this is definitely a historic moment. Bernie supporting Clinton in an effort to defeat Trump, and President Obama endorsing Hillary Clinton. Let me get your response to the moment first.
To understand what's happening, first of all, congratulations to Secretary Clinton for consolidating the Democratic nomination. There isn't any question that we now know who the two nominees will be. And in a sense, of the Democratic side, all eyes are on Senator Sanders, trying to figure out what he's going to do next. And I think he's made that pretty clear. He's going to help Hillary Clinton in the fall. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand, a couple of things. That one, the real work of uniting the party is up to Secretary Clinton more than it is to Senator Sanders. And it's always the winner's job to do the uniting. And that's just going to take a number of things. I think that the issues on the table are important. But what they would lead to here is not so much a marriage as a truce within the Democratic Party, and not so much a single unified movement as a coalition of movements who have come together to defeat the fascist and fraud Donald Trump. And the tricky part for Bernie Sanders is that he wants to do two things at once. He's as he said from the very first day that he announced his campaign, he's going to be supporting the Democratic nominee in the fall. But every bit as important to him and to the people who've supported him, he's going to be building an independent political movement to hold accountable the winner of this race. And that's a tricky thing, to do those two things at once.
Bill, how does a Bernie Sanders join Clinton in defeating Trump, but still stay true to his followers, particularly because there are such fundamental disputes between Clinton and him, and as well as President Obama and the party for that matter?
I think one thing I'd say is that rather than paper over their differences, which is what modern politics does, and especially the phrase-making politics of the Democratic Party, with which the secretary is very closely identified. The Clintons have been masters of that, of using language to create the appearance of reconciliation when in fact the underlying policies have not been reconciled. And I think a better approach is to have a frank recognition of the policy differences that divide most of the Democratic base, including many, I believe, millions of voters who voted for Secretary Clinton out of personal loyalty or belief in her strength as a candidate, but who are in fact much closer to Senator Sanders in their views among almost all of the issues that divided them. That division between the base of the party and its elite, rather than paper it over with a few phrases in the platform, it would be a more honest and I think more politically effective exercise to come out and say what they are, and to make what legitimate compromises they can and move forward. That Bernie Sanders going forward is going to be doing two things at once. And on the one hand, he's going to be supporting Hillary Clinton. He made that clear from the first, and he'll be doing it. And on the other hand, he's going to be trying to build an independent political movement so that no matter who wins this election, there will be a strong progressive voice to hold that person accountable. And it's up to the winner, by the way. It's Secretary Clinton's job, far more than it's Bernie Sanders' job, to pull the party together. And I think she can do that by recognizing the frank differences on trade, on military interventions abroad, on the kinds of remedies that are required to fight climate change, on pay-to-play politics and its critical role in dismantling the middle class in the United States. These aren't small issues. These are the core issues under which any sustainable political coalition are in fact built. A single-payer healthcare, education, trade, pay-to-play, political corruption, foreign interventionism. The differences between the Democratic base and the Democratic leadership are far deeper than the differences between the Republican base and the Republican leadership, even though Republicans have fought more hotly over them and for a much longer period of time. So our goal here is really to recognize that what we can do right now between now and November is really not a marriage, but a truce, and a coming together of forces to defeat someone whom all agree, a man, Donald Trump, who should never, ever be president of the United States, while at the same time moving this movement forward, continuing to build it, and continuing to keep that pressure on.
Now, Bill, Sanders' campaign has already created much rift within the Democratic Party. One of the key issues that they were arguing about and unhappy about is the issue of superdelegates. However, Bernie Sanders was a bit confused and led to a lot of confusion in his movement with his effort, especially leading up to California, with the conversation about superdelegates and providing not such clarity on it. What do you make of that, and do you think that led to some people going over to Hillary Clinton in an effort to defeat Trump in California, for example?
I think that's possible. Weeks ago, I would have preferred to see Senator Sanders simply come out and say, look, I understand that that all the normal metrics of horse race politics say that this is going to be, extraordinarily difficult for us to go forward. But we're here for more than that, as he had said from the beginning. We're here to build a movement. We're here to change a platform. We're here to transform not just the Democratic Party but the country. And so going forward, I wish that we'd switch to getting rid of the superdelegates, as I wrote at the time. These people have no business voting. Rather than courting their vote or laying out unlikely scenarios under which these superdelegates, who are elected by no one and are accountable to no one, would somehow wake up and see what was really happening in this country and in this race. I wish that the crusade from the beginning had been to get rid of them. But that's sort of the good news of this moment. And now, in fact, that will be, I expect, the underlying, that will be rather the overriding, message going forward. Let me just offer, I talked before about, where are there compromises once you've recognized in a frank way the differences. Superdelegates are just one tiny example, but there are over 700 of them, nearly a third of what it takes to nominate a candidate at a convention. Their effect isn't just arithmetical. It's not just the number of delegates they gave her, but the profound psychological edge it gave her, and with donors and with the press and with the public throughout this campaign. Most of those delegates, whenever they're described by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, they're described as elected officials and party leaders. They're not. 456 of the 714 are Democratic National Committee members. Again, nobody elected them. No one even knows who they are. 75 of them were appointed, which is far more than many whole states get to elect. And those delegates, that majority of those so-called superdelegates, they simply have no right to be there. They shouldn't vote at this convention, and they damn well shouldn't be voting at any future convention. And so that getting rid of those, if you want to make an argument that House and Senate members and governors should get to go as delegates, that's a different argument. I'm in favor of all delegates conforming to the wishes of the party, as expressed by the voters in primaries and caucuses. But at the very least, this great majority of them who are not elected, they have to go, or the system remains intrinsically fraudulent.
Bill, so what should the Bernie Sanders followers at this point do in this election cycle?
There are two tasks here, and they each have a claim on the energies and the enthusiasm of Sanders supporters, in my view. One is defeating Trump, and the other is developing a movement that will hold both parties accountable and whoever wins this election accountable after November. And it's tricky because those are obviously somewhat conflicting goals, but in the end, I think they reinforce each other, or they can. So I think that there are two things. And one, people got to sort out their feelings. I think slowly more people will come to eventually support to Secretary Clinton than not. Clearly, there are real fissures. Among the Bernie voters, there are larger questions. Some may, in fact, be attracted to Trump. Some will go green. Some will go libertarian. The Democratic Party would be well advised to take more seriously some of the issues of the right to privacy of individuals and the excessive secrecy of the state in order to speak more clearly and forcefully to libertarian voters, or a certain kind of libertarian voter in this country. I think that's where some of our coalition has gone. But there's a great deal of work to do within the Sanders campaign to figure out what the form is going to be of this movement going forward. There are many organizations, the Working Families Party, 350.org, Democracy for America, MoveOn.org. There are many progressive movements that have been truly democratic and truly grassroots that did not morph into Washington lobbies as so much of the labor movement, some of the old line environmental movement, all the groups that went and endorsed Hillary because they preferred access to pressure. They wanted to play that Washington game. They've become basically Washington lobbies. And there's a rebuilding here of a Democratic left that consists of the Sanders campaign and of many other organizations, some of which, like 350.org, aren't in electoral politics, many of which are very forcefully electoral politics. I think beginning to bring together this real independent progressive political movement is a job that begins now. And as people begin to see that happening, I think it will actually be easier, not harder, to make sure that in November, Donald Trump is not elected president of the United States.
And you mentioned earlier, Bill, that some people will obviously gravitate towards the Green Party as a result of Bernie Sanders losing the nomination. Is this a good idea, given the political situation, and if the vote is split within the Green Party and the Democratic Party, then the possibility of a Trump presidency becomes more real?
This has been a disagreement I've had with my progressive friends for decades now. Long before there was a Tea Party in the Republican Party, I wanted a Tea Party in the Democratic Party. That is to say, a movement which is, as I've described it, independent, but which first of all operates within the Democratic Party in the sense that it brings primary challenges to a Democratic leadership that is too close to Wall Street, that is out of touch with what were once the values of the Democratic Party in its glory days. There have been wonderful moments in its history when it did stand up for the disadvantaged and the oppressed and for workers. And as it began its long-standing dalliance and then really marriage to Wall Street, it lost sight of those values. And so the question is, how do you get a progressive government? How do you create a political force that does champion those values? And one theory among a lot of Sanders supporters and progressives is that you pick an independent candidate and you fight from the outside in the general election. Given our federalist system, that theory that would work in any parliamentary democracy has backfired here for half a century. I would rather see the Republican Party split up into two parties than to see the Democratic Party do that. At the same time, watching the Tea Party primary, dozens of Republican incumbents take over the House of Representatives, nearly take over the Senate. They have elected, make no question about it, Trump is in many ways the perfect Tea Party candidate, xenophobic and racist and conspiratorial, and also furious at crony capitalism, at least in the speeches that he gives, usurping many of the arguments that were historically progressive arguments. And the Tea Party has reached an absolute zenith of its influence. And I believe that there's something to learn from that strategy. And so I hope that we'll be building a movement that supports the Democrats that are worth supporting. And at the same time, finally challenges some of the people within the party who hold power. Debbie Wasserman Schultz should go. So should many, many members of Congress and of the Senate. So should many of the leadership cadres who are out there who've gone too far, who've drifted too far from the core values of the party. In the last decade, in the entire Tea Party revolution period, on the Democratic side, there was only a single major primary. It was here in Connecticut against Joseph Lieberman, and that was 10 years ago. That was 10 years ago. And so you have this cadre of pay-to-play Wall Street Democrats whose actions go unscrutinized and whose elections go unchallenged. And you have where we once had dynamic, great movements, consumer, women, peace, environmental, civil rights, standing up and pressuring the Democrats, which made everybody stronger. We've had really a kind of colonization of the left by the Democratic Party, turning a previous grassroots political movement into really just a political action committee, a kind of closed shop working for one party. I think that's been a mistake. I think the Democrats and the progressives were better off when they dealt at arm's length, and the progressives were certainly better off when they dealt from a position of strength. And so for me, that's the direction we need to be moving in. And we can do both those things. We can try to win this election, and we can begin to put that movement into gear. There are a lot of people out there, both inside of and outside of the Sanders campaign, I think, who are ready to go.
And take over from a progressive standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, if you can't run the Democratic Party, you probably can't run the world. And I think it would be amazing to see how much religion these Democratic incumbents would get if just a handful of them received serious challenges and were chased out of their jobs. And if people, made this much real, something that has not been clear from most Washington-based progressive organizations, and that is that there is such a thing as a deal breaker. If you're not there on trade, if you're not there on pay-to-play politics, if you're not there on real reform of the healthcare system, then we're not for you. There's a point at which we walk away. We're not just here in the business of apologizing for wayward Democrats. We're here to strengthen the platform, to grow and expand the party by making it more responsive to the real needs of a broad cross-section of Americans. And in the end, to solve real problems. I once said in a column that the party's slogan could be "Die slower, vote Democratic." We keep not solving the problems that are most important, that matter most to the people in this country. All that vast middle class that lost their pensions and the value in their homes, whose kids can't afford college, who haven't had a wage in a hike in a half a generation or more. We stopped dealing with those core economic injustice and political reform issues. We have to go back to doing that. If we do that, it'll cause some great discomfort for the people who've been selling off our heritage for political contributions. but the real party and the real progressive movement beneath it will grow greatly in strength and in numbers.
Bill, there's so much more to cover as the Democratic convention's coming up, the Republican convention's coming up, and we hope you join us again very soon.
I'll be thrilled to do so. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.